Say it. Apologize. Right now. The studio clock hit 0003. 3 seconds that felt longer than a whole movie. And then Clint Eastwood didn't argue. He didn't smile. He didn't perform. He just stared. A wall of cameras waited for him to blink first. A packed audience waited for the punchline. Producers waited for the legend to play along, because live TV doesn't stop for anyone, not even Clint. But Clint didn't move like a guest. He moved like a man who had already decided what he would never do again. The host leaned in, hungry for it. The control room held their breath. A stage manager lifted a hand, ready to cut to commercial. And Clint? He stayed perfectly still, like he was listening to something nobody else could hear. Then he did the one thing live television can't control. He stood up, he stepped away from the chair, and he walked off. No apology, no explanation, just silence and footsteps. And the question that hit the room like a gunshot was simple. What happened next that made everyone in that studio realize they had pushed the wrong man? To understand why this moment mattered, it helps to understand what Clint Eastwood represents in Hollywood. Not just an actor, not just a director, a discipline, a tone, a kind of old-school gravity that doesn't ask the room for permission. By the time this story entered Hollywood lore, Eastwood had already lived multiple careers. He had survived the studio system, reinvented himself through westerns, built his own production identity, and, most importantly, earned the rare reputation for working fast, quiet, and under control. Industry coverage has described him as Mr. Efficiency, the kind of filmmaker whose sets run like clockwork, often with familiar crew returning film after film. Los Angeles Times. And that matters here, because live TV is the opposite of an Eastwood set. Live TV is chaos wearing makeup. It runs on pressure. Like it runs on provocation. It runs on the unspoken rule that the guest must play the game. Smile through it, joke through it, apologize if the host demands it. This story, told and retold in industry circles, often with slight variations, usually places Clint on a high-profile stage, bright lights, a scripted rundown, and a producer's voice in someone's ear saying, "Keep him talking." It's the kind of situation where reputations are made in minutes, where a single awkward beat becomes a headline, where a legend can be reduced to a meme if he gives them the wrong facial expression at the wrong time. And the reason it still matters? Because it's not really about Clint winning an argument. It's about a line that Hollywood constantly tries to move, and the rare person who refuses to step back with it. Every mini-movie needs a counterforce, not a cartoon villain, someone believable, someone who thinks they're right. In this story, that person is the host-producer machine, a polished, media-trained figure with perfect hair, perfect teeth, and the kind of confidence that comes from controlling the room every day. He's not screaming. He doesn't need to. He uses a softer weapon, timing, tone, social pressure. He smiles like a friend, but he steers like a prosecutor. He has a stack of cue cards, a teleprompter, and a control room full of people who can cut away from Clint's face at any second. He knows the audience loves moments. He knows controversy keeps viewers from changing the channel. And he also knows something else. Clint Eastwood doesn't do loud performances in interviews. Clint doesn't explain himself for sport. So the host tries to create a different Clint. He opens with praise, big, flattering lines about a living legend. The audience claps on command. The cameras glide in close. Then comes the pivot. A clip rolls. A quote is read. A controversy is hinted at, carefully worded, just vague enough to feel dangerous. The host's tone shifts into something like concern, not anger, disappointment. That's the trap. Because disappointment is a leash. It says, "You're better than this. Prove it to us." And then, in some versions of the story, the host introduces the fix, the easy way out. Just say sorry. Simple, clean, television-friendly. And there's a reason this tactic works on many people. It uses the oldest pressure in the world, the pressure to belong, to keep the room comfortable, to keep the audience laughing, to keep the machine moving. But Clint Eastwood didn't become Clint Eastwood by belonging to machines. He became Clint Eastwood by outlasting them. On a live set, pressure isn't just emotional, it's financial, mechanical, mathematical. There's a tight schedule, a pre-written rundown, a commercial break locked to the second. If the show drags, affiliates complain. If a segment collapses, producers panic. And when the guest is Clint Eastwood, the stakes spike. Because the show doesn't just want a conversation, it wants a headline. It wants a clip that gets replayed. It wants a moment that spreads. Eastwood, meanwhile, is the wrong kind of guest for that plan. People who have worked with him describe a filmmaker who doesn't waste motion, who doesn't feed drama, who keeps things simple and moves on. That reputation is tied to the way he directs, quietly, and how he ends takes with minimal fuss. But The Guardian. Tom Hanks famously joked that Eastwood treats actors like horses, meaning he doesn't shout action because it can spook the room. He keeps things calm, then stops when it's done. The Guardian. That mindset collides with live TV culture. Live TV wants reactions. Clint wants results. Live TV wants confession. Clint wants precision. And when the host corners him with an on-air apology demand, it isn't really about morality, it's about control. If Clint apologizes on command, the show wins. If Clint refuses and stays seated, the show can frame him as stubborn. If Clint argues, the show gets fireworks. But there's a fourth option the producers never like, because it breaks the entire equation. Walking away. The host begins gently. Friendly voice, light laughter, a compliment that sounds sincere. Clint sits with that familiar stillness, hands relaxed, posture straight, face calm. He's present, but he's not offering anything extra. The host asks about Clint's career, about directing, about legacy. The audience is warm, the cameras are steady. It almost feels safe. Then, pattern interrupt. The host changes the temperature with a single sentence. Some people say you owe someone an apology. The audience makes that half sound, part curiosity, part discomfort, the kind of sound you hear right before a scene turns. Clint doesn't bite. He answers like a man who's been through 1,000 rooms like this, simple, controlled, no heat. The host smiles wider, because calm is frustrating. Calm doesn't clip well, so he pushes again, just a little. And the open loop forms. How far will he go to get Clint to react? Now the host brings the audience into it. He gestures to the crowd. He gestures to the camera. He makes it feel like a public service, like he's speaking for everyone watching at home. It's not an interview anymore. It's a moral performance, and that's the trick. If Clint refuses, he can be framed as cold. If he pushes back, he can be framed as defensive. The host starts talking more. Longer sentences, more righteousness, more confidence. Clint stays quiet. Another pattern interrupt. The host name drops. A studio. A headline. A so-called industry reaction. The kind of vague authority that sounds real on television. Clint's face doesn't change much, but the room feels different now. The air gets tighter. Because people can sense when a legend is being baited. And then the host goes for the simplest weapon of all. The forced choice. So, will you apologize? That question sounds clean, but it's a trap door. It turns a complex situation into a yes/no button. Clint doesn't press the button. He pauses. Not a nervous pause, a decision pause. The audience laughs a little, hoping he'll break the tension with a joke. He doesn't. Mini open loop. If he won't apologize, what will he do instead? The host senses it slipping. If Clint keeps answering calmly, the segment dies. So the host raises the stakes. He stops pretending it's casual. His words get sharper, longer, more performative. He talks about responsibility. He talks about today's world. He talks about the right thing. And in many versions of this story, this is the moment the producer voice in his ear tells him, now. Get it now. So the host says it again, but this time like an order. Apologize on live television right now. The room changes. This isn't banter. It's power. The audience becomes a jury. The cameras become witnesses. And Clint Eastwood, who built his entire legend on refusing to be owned, sits in silence. 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. In those seconds, the show realizes something terrifying. They can't fill the silence with anything that matters. Only Clint can. And Clint chooses not to. He doesn't explode, he doesn't plead, he doesn't negotiate, he stands. A few people clap, confused claps, like they think it's part of the show. Someone laughs too loud. The host's smile freezes. Clint adjusts his jacket like he's leaving a restaurant, like this is simple. And then, another pattern interrupt. He looks directly at the host, not angry, not smug, just final. And he walks, not rushing, not storming, walking, toward the dark edge of the stage where the cameras don't follow unless they're told to. After the red light turns off, the real story begins. Because Hollywood doesn't just watch what happens on camera, it watches what happens after. Crew members in these kinds of situations tend to remember the same detail. Clint didn't rant in the hallway. He didn't demand special treatment. He just kept moving, quietly, like he had somewhere more important to be. And that's what spreads through the industry faster than any clip. Not Clint yelled, not Clint melted down, but Clint refused to be managed. On sets, that reputation is gold. It signals to crews and actors that the work comes first and the circus comes second. That matches the long-running perception of Eastwood as a filmmaker who values efficiency and steadiness, with crews returning across multiple projects under his Malpazzo banner and studio partnerships over time. Los Angeles Times. Meanwhile, the talk show world spins its own version. Some would say he was difficult, others would say he was principled. But the chatter always circles the same conclusion. The show tried to turn a legend into a segment, and the legend walked out of the segment. In the days after, the clip, if it exists in the version being told, becomes a debate. People argue about respect, about owing the audience, about public accountability. But professionals notice something else. Clint didn't insult anyone. He didn't humiliate a vulnerable person. He didn't punch down. He simply refused the demand to apologize on command. And in a business built on image, that's a rare kind of control. The clean moral of the story isn't never apologize. It's this. An apology is not a currency you pay to escape discomfort. In Hollywood, and in life, there are people who do not want truth. They want a performance of truth. Something that looks good from the outside and costs nothing on the inside. Clint Eastwood's legend has always been built on the opposite: restraint, discipline, choosing when to speak and when not to. And when the room demanded a public apology like a trophy, he didn't give them a trophy. He gave them a boundary. Because sometimes the strongest thing a person can say is not a speech. It's a decision, a calm exit, a closed door, a life that doesn't beg the room to understand it. So if there's one takeaway to carry out of this story, it's this. Don't confuse noise with power. Don't confuse pressure with truth. And don't hand your dignity to someone who only wants it as content. Final quote style line. When a man knows who he is, he doesn't raise his voice. He just leaves.